It's surreal to me to think that we're getting a sequel to Rebellion, and to be honest, the realization still hasn't set in yet. This series is very dear to me, and Rebellion is one of my favorite movies of all time, so to say I'm excited for the new movie is quite an understatement. However, with that excitement also comes worry. Worry that this will be a dissatisfying finale. But instead of complaining about something that might happen, I'd like to discuss what I think would make Walpurgis no Kaiten a good finale and a worthy follow-up to Rebellion. So, it should be no surprise just how popular Madoka Magica has become. As a subversion of the magical girl genre, it was honestly groundbreaking at the time of its inception and later flourished into the phenomenon that we have come to know it as today. Rebellion, while it's not loved by all fans of the series, is honestly one of the most interesting parts of the series, in my opinion, exploring the concepts set up by the original series in greater detail, like the structure of labyrinths and their witches. Interesting story points and world building like this is what made me and so many others fans of the series to begin with. So, at the bare minimum, to be a satisfying film, Movie 4 should expand on the world of Madoka Magica to explore some details that haven't been fully explored yet. Going back to Rebellion, however, for 8 whole years, we've been left with so many unanswered questions, and for all that time, the fans have just been left to speculate and theorize without Studio Shaft throwing so much as a bone our way. But now that a sequel is finally here, it'll be interesting to see if the movie can actually live up to the expectations set by those fans, and if it can be as good as, or even surpass, Rebellion for those of us that love the movie. So if you watch my theory video, Homer's Tragic Plan, you'll know that I think the plot of the movie is going to revolve around Homer attempting to undo the time loop in some way, figuring out a way to protect Madoka but at the cost of losing her. While I do believe this plot point is likely, I don't think Homer should be able to achieve this goal. And aside from, just being an advocate for the ship, I don't think it makes sense narratively for one to be without the other. The series has always focused on the unique relationship that Madoka and Homer share, and the core of each movie has always been about how one reacts to the other's actions. So to take that away in movie 4 simply wouldn't make any sense. So, with that said, what should be the endgame for these two? Well, I believe, and this is if my theory ends up being true, Madoka should step in to stop Homura. From here, I can see the ending going in one of two ways. So the first ending that I can see happening is that we get a recreation of the universe, but it's sort of similar to the one at the end of movie 2. This time, however, instead of becoming the Law of Cycles proper, and only Homura being able to remember her, Madoka will still be able to fulfill her roles as the Law of Cycles, but use a body as a vessel to interact with the physical world, effectively being in two places at once. This idea could work in theory, as it means Madoka's wish doesn't get undone, but neither does Homura's. Homura's wish was, of course, to be strong enough to protect Madoka, and in this world, she would be safe enough from any harm while upholding her godly duties. In theory, this could also work if Akuma Homura and Madokami coexist as two entities in the universe going forward. So the other theory that I can come up with is that Homura and Madoka will both die at the end of the movie. While this would of course be an emotionally devastating outcome, both wishes still technically get fulfilled. At the end of the second movie, we're left with the implication that the only person that Madokami cannot heal is Homura, and her despair is what leads to rebellion. If Madoka was to be safe, even in death, Homura's despair might finally be clear, especially if she was to join her in said death. We need to see more from movie 4 for me to fully form an opinion on this or even explain how this would happen, but I think it's possible as the idea was already brought up in the original series when Homura suggested that they both turn into witches. My favorite characters in the series are Kyoko and Sayaka. Both are tragic characters who have a well-crafted story and dynamic, with moments that arguably rival Madoka and Homura's. At the core, Kyoko and Sayaka's stories are a simple two sides of the same coin / clashing ideals with the same end goal type of narrative, but there is a surprising amount of depth to their characters, which is explored in and out of the main series in great detail. While Rebellion was able to give us some great moments with the two, I think movie 4 is the chance to finally give the two the happy endings that they rightfully deserve. Whether or not this is achieved by making them end up in a relationship at the end of the movie as the end goal remains to be seen, but whatever happens, I just want both of them to have a happy ending. And this is how I would go about it. So, Sayaka should not become a magical girl. Maybe her powers get removed by Madoka, or the Sayaka we see in Homer's New World gets her memories restored. Whatever happens, it's very clear that becoming a magical girl was the worst thing that ever happened to Sayaka. Now, in a way, you can argue the opposite for Kyoko, as so much of her growth has come from being a magical girl, so simply undoing her contract or removing her powers wouldn't have the same impact as it would for Sayaka. Depending on the end of the movie, however, magical girls may not even have a place in the new world, and therefore they can't exist. Whether or not this ends up being the case, I still think Kyoko and Sayaka should return to normal, but without undoing the effects of their wishes, just rewriting events to change how those outcomes were achieved. For example, you could make Kyosuke's accident less severe, or maybe make it that Kyoko bribes people to come to her father's church sermons. Whatever happens, I think a good case can be made for Kyoko and Sayaka having their wishes rewritten in a way, so to speak, as I just explained, as undoing what happened after those wishes would change so much about their characters. So, keeping the effects of the wishes and effectively everything that came after would still leave us with the characters that we know and love today. But they lose the tragedy that befell them as magical girls. There is also, of course, the debate of whether or not Kyoko and Sayaka should end up together as a couple, and while I adore the ship, it's my favorite in the series, I will admit that I don't think it's needed for the two to achieve a happy ending. However, if it can be written in a way that works, and it isn't forced in any way, I'd obviously love to see that happen. So Mami is not exactly a character that I like, and it's not that she's a bad character by any means, it's just that of the main five, she arguably has the most poorly written story in my opinion. I would be remiss to not mention Mami's character development in Rebellion, which does make her a slightly better character, given that she has more to do in the story, but it isn't quite what I want to see from her in the series. In my various rewatches over the years, I have been able to pick up on some of the more hidden intricacies to her character, like her anxiety and her general fear of loneliness. But aside from more obscure facts and the outside source material such as Portable and the Kyoko and Mami prequel book, not a lot for Mami has ever been resolved in the main series, and for the most part she's just the poster girl of the show's dark nature. However, it's not too late to give her a satisfying ending with what we do have in the series, and here's what I would like to see. With Sayaka and Kyoko, I've suggested that they should stay as normal humans. But despite this, I don't want their wishes completely undone, as it's an important part of their growth. For Mami, I also want her to be a normal human, but unlike those two, I want her history to get a reset to make it that the car accident never happened. Now, you could argue that her wish was also important to her growth, but of everyone this could happen to, Mami is arguably the only one it can feasibly work for, as her wish was literally just to survive. Everything that followed that, finding the group, becoming friends with Kyoko, etc., could reasonably happen without her wish, but of course only if the accident never happened. If we assume this is possible, the outcome could end up leaving Mami in a better place than she ever was in the main series, as she would still have her parents around and likely wouldn't be as lonely, if at all, in this new timeline. So I will briefly touch on Nagisa, as she has been made into one of the main characters for the most part. So I think a good way to write Nagisa back into the main cast would be to either have her be someone that Mami knows, like a friend or something, or maybe making her an adopted part of Mami's family, something like that. I think it'd be pretty easy to figure out how to write Nagisa into Mami's new life, but besides those two options, I don't really know what else you could do, but it's certainly possible. So with all of that said, what should happen after movie 4? Well, I think it's needless to say that the fourth movie won't be the complete end of the series, but I think it should be the end of the main canon and our original cast. The best ending to a series, in my opinion, is one that doesn't get undone and just continues for the sake of continuing it. Imagine if Iron Man suddenly came back into the MCU, undoing his incredible ending for the character in Endgame, or if Emperor Palpatine was suddenly brought back for the new Star Wars Oh. For Madoka Magica, I want the series to conclude the story of Mitaki Haru City with this fourth movie. And instead of creating new stories with the same cast, why not go back and properly adapt the stories of Major Record? It's an interesting story and has potential to work as a spin-off if it's handled correctly. If we were going to get anything new out of the main series, however, I wouldn't mind seeing an OVA of the Kyoko and Mami prequel, or maybe even a further exploration into some of the timelines Homura went through. But besides that, the story of Homura, Madoka, Sayaka, Kyoko, and Mami should end here while the series goes in a new direction. So regardless of what actually happens, I 100% believe Studio Shaft will be able to pull off this finale well. These are just some ideas that I would like to see, and of course is in no way a demand to the writers or anything like that. This movie has been in the works for 7 whole years, which is insane, and I'm sure that they've had plenty of time to see the reaction to Rebellion, and they know what people do and don't like about the series by now, and will give us a fantastic movie. It'll be hard to say goodbye to the series, but that's the beauty of it. If they can pull off the ending well, then I'm going to be happy with that, and I can't wait to see what they give us.